Okay, our speaker tonight is Dr. Julie Zimmerman from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. She's a professor there at the anthropology department. She's been conducting research at a number of different sites, but some on campus, and she's also a specialist in studying the faunal remains from archaeological sites. And she's got some neat ideas about Cahokia and its origins and whether it was what she calls a theater state or not, or maybe not or not. But
I don't really.
so she's agreed to talk to us about sort of a different aspect of that, is the importance of storytelling in the creation of Cahokia. So we'll have Julie speak.
Thank you, Bill. Is this on now? Okay. Let's see. When Bill asked me to do this, I said, when was the last time I talked to you guys? But I didn't. I forgot that I actually gave this talk at the winter series just last January. So if you were in at the Cahokia Winter Series lecture January of 2022, I'm sorry for the repetition. However, as we will discuss tonight, every storytelling event is unique. And a new performance, I have all new jokes. And thanks to Gail, I've furiously read like about 6,000 pages Tom Emerson has written in the last year. Last night, well, some of you slept. If you have any questions, and my jokes had to evolve as, I was like, well, who's going to be in this room? And I sat down, and then half the room just filled up more. So my jokes are moving on the lamb. What? Oh, thank you. So right here.
Don't move.
Okay. If you have, and how many people are on Facebook Live right now?
We had 6.
They just.
We started a bit late, so.
Oh, okay, yeah. They're like, oh God. Okay, not that one again. All right. If you have any questions, just holler, okay? And I will try to answer them. And what I say that Cahokia is a theater state, I ended that article actually by saying, I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just throwing it out there. Think about it, okay? And I'll be perfectly frank. Wait, you're Frank. I'll be perfectly honest that, this article has not been cited nearly as often as I would like to have seen it cited. And I would talk about possibly the political reasons why of the present, not from 1,000 years ago, that it has not been. And I will just say this, Robert Hall, some of you knew, thought this was a really good article. So there. Okay. And I did have, and still do have immense respect for Robert Hall. Anyway, so I'll talk about what that idea of the theater state is when I get there. I do want to point out our land acknowledgement statement, SAUE, is sitting on, there were treaties with the Kickapoo in the Illinois Confederacy in 1819 and 1818, and I could give you the history of some of that. And when we've added here the GSU and peoples and others, that includes groups like the Osage and Ponca, Omaha, Kaw, Quapaw, who believe that they built Cahokia. I personally, archaeologists know that Cahokia was multi-ethnic, and that there were immigrants coming. Even when Cahokia was declining in population, there were still immigrants coming, up to like 30%, we know from the skeletal remains of the people of Cahokia were immigrant. So the and others includes all those people that we cannot possibly figure out for a variety of reasons. It also includes the fact that there's a good 10,000 or years longer of Native American occupation in this area before that. On the SAUE campus, for example, the oldest artifact we have found in our excavations there is a Folsom Lake point that's probably at least 8,000 years old. Okay, so Native Americans were here for a very long time, and we want to acknowledge them. And yeah, okay. So I want to start out by saying that that language and storytelling are what make us human. And I believe that absolutely as an anthropologist, I could, if this were my introduction to anthropology class, which hopefully I will never have to teach again before I retire, but I used to love teaching that class, but there's abundant, I think, evidence, archaeological, fossil, genetic, supporting the notion that storytelling is what makes us human. I don't have time to go into all that tonight. The great apes, for example, can be taught sign language, and they can speak and tell. They can lie. They're creative. They make up new words, but they can't get grammar, and because they can't get grammar, they really can't tell stories the way we can. Okay, an article just came out like last week in Science, I think, saying that they've just discovered that chimps actually can use up to like 3 different vocalizations together that they think are actually meaningful. And so those combinations of 3, like, I don't know how that works mathematically speaking, but they can't tell stories like we can, okay? And when I look at, for example, the caves in Upper Paleolithic France, when you look at those beautiful paintings from the Upper Paleolithic period, 20,000 years ago, that is definitely evidence of storytelling. And I'm not the first anthropologist to think that. Franz Boas actually wrote that. I thought it was my idea, but it turns out he thought of it first over 100 years ago. Okay, so language and storytelling, I think, are what make us human. And that is also consistent with a Native American perspective. And so as an archaeologist with a PhD in anthropology, I try to think as much as possible about a Native American point of view. I don't, I can't, I can try the best I can to understand a Native American point of view, but let me be clear, I'm not Native American, all right? So here's a book by Scott Momaday, who's oops, that was not where I was trying to go. Scott Momaday is Kiowa, and he wrote this book, Man Made of Words, in which he said, the story is, the title of that book is based upon a traditional Kiowa story that word language basically saves this guy. And I won't tell you that story because that's not the interest of us tonight. But here's a quote from Scott Momaday. He says, "We exist in the element of language. Language is necessary to thought, and thought, as it is manifested in language, distinguishes us humans from all other creatures." So language is what makes us human, storytelling. Here's a book called Storyteller by Leslie Marmon Silko, another great Native American author. And the title for this book is from a poem about a storyteller. And again, it's story. She says in there, stories are what save us. Stories are what keep us alive. But she writes, "The human capacity for language and storytelling go hand in hand. Neither precedes the other. Rather, the urge to share our experience, to tell our stories to another human is so strong that humans invented languages." And Gerald Visner, another Native American author, Leslie Marmon Silko's Laguna, that is southwestern Puebloan. Gerald Visner is Anishinaabe or Ojibwa. "You can't understand the world without telling a story. There isn't any center to the world but a story." So these are contemporary Native American authors saying this. And if you go back, for example, and look at, I think the Dene origin story, it makes it sound like the world begins as kind of a primordial goo, and then the word comes out of that. The word sounds kind of like something out of the Bible, doesn't it? In the beginning was the word. Okay. All right. So language and storytelling make us human, and I want to point out that storytelling is a ritual. Now, if I say something is a ritual, what do you think? You think it's something sacred, or you think it's something kind of patterned and formulaic? Not all rituals are necessarily sacred, but storytelling is kind of a ritual in both senses of those words. They're not always sacred stories. Okay, you might be telling a funny story. Native Americans, like Leslie Marmon Silko writes about Laguna people sitting around, like just participatory, telling these stories and working so hard to make each other laugh. And you might look at an event like that and say it is not sacred, but in another sense, it is a sacred. The stories themselves can be sacred. The storytelling act itself is considered sacred, and it is also a ritual in the sense that it is formulaic. There are beginnings, middles, and ends to the story. Native American storytelling isn't typically linear the way our storytelling is, and an epic tale can take night after night after night to tell. The storytelling is usually done, or was traditionally done, in the winter, in the evening, and it's a good time of year to do it. There were taboos against telling stories at other times of year, like a snake will bite you, or your crops will fail, or something like that. But you can imagine there are good practical reasons to be telling stories at night in the winter, because what else are you going to do in the story in the winter? In this particular painting here, let me see what my neck. Let me come back to that. I thought in a second. In this particular painting here, it's George Catlin, 1832. It's called Interior View of the Medicine Lodge, Mandan Okipa Ceremony. And the Okipa ceremony is something like what do you call it, Sundance. And you see these robes coming down. There are other paintings from this series which shows men hanging from through skewers through their chests from those robes. In a normal, this is a particular ceremony that's for men only, and that's why you only see men sitting around here. I couldn't find another traditional painting painting of a traditional storytelling scene that didn't look like some modern stereotypical thing. So that is a historic painting that shows you at least one particular ritual for men. Now, what does that Sundance mean? I mean, I have no idea. I don't, this is not my. As an archaeologist, I always like to say that's not my time period. Also, I don't study the Mandan. I don't know I don't know exactly what the ceremony means, except I know it's about sacrifice and proving yourself. But I would know if I knew the stories behind it. So I want to point out that storytelling is itself a ritual, but storytelling also gives meaning to all other rituals, right? If you go to church on Sunday, or you go to your, temple or your mosque, it's the stories that give meaning to all the words that are being said, okay? And they do change. I went to Mass with my brother at Christmas, and I hadn't been in years and years and years, and gosh, they changed some of the words. It was pretty upsetting. But still, the general meaning behind, I still recognize the different stages, the formula is still there. And I still understand the stories behind what is taking place. If I didn't know those stories, it wouldn't make any sense to me. I would think it all looked pretty strange, okay? So storytelling is itself a ritual, and it gives meaning to all the other rituals that take place. I won't spend a lot of time here because I only see a few PhDs in anthropology, and everybody else will be like, stop, we want to hear about Kokia, okay? Well, there are no pictures on this slide. So I want to tell you, there's a huge, vast body of literature on storytelling, from anthropology, from folklore, from literature. And the long and short of it is, I'm going to make some basic statements here, going back, again, to anthropologists and other writers for the past century, that stories justify our values, what we believe, how we behave, social structure, the hierarchy that we live in, okay? We accept that there are elites and non-elites in our society. It was meant to be that way. That's what our stories tell us, okay? He's rich because he just got lucky, or he worked hard. Our stories justify that for us, all right? Stories create worldview. They create the way we see the world. We see all the world around us through a lens. I'm sorry, I have to stay right here. I'm used to moving. We see the world through a lens of through stories that we've been told since we were little kids, since we were infants. We've been hearing stories, and that's the way we see the world. Okay. And storytelling is a performance. Even though I gave this lecture a year ago, it's going to be a little bit different tonight. Sometimes stories change. Sometimes no performance is repeated exactly. Stories can be memorized, and you can tell them exactly. I mean, but when Marilyn tells stories, does she tell them exactly word for word? Never, okay? So storytellers can memorize things, but that's not usually the way storytelling works, and every performance is unique. Stories change sometimes just think about a game of telephone. They're changing as they get passed on. Like, let's say I've heard Marilyn's stories, and I go, yeah, I love that one about the mosquitoes in the ears, and that's all I got. I can't tell the whole story, okay? So the story changes as it gets passed on from one person to the next. But also, sometimes those stories are intentionally changed, okay? And we'll come back to that. Well, we'll come back to that thought in a second here. Franz Boas, who is considered the father of four-field anthropology, and his student Ruth Benedict both studied storytelling among Native Americans. And they wrote about the formulaic patterning of the stories and how, for example, Ruth Benedict talked about stock incidents. For example, like, you know, a hero might take off flying, and we're going to see a hero we talk about tonight does that. Stock folkloristic devices, that's why the turtle's back has cracks on it, those kinds of things. A really cool example of seeing it, so they could take any story, you could take an actual event and start adding these little devices to it and adding catchphrases to make it a good story. And that's one way stories change, through the creativity of that storyteller. And the cultural anthropologist Fred Egan, I think like back in the 1960s or something, went back to, found a Hopi story that was first recorded, like, I don't know, in the 1850s or something like that. A group of Hopi men were traveling in a Navajo, a Diné man, attacked them or something like that. I don't remember I've forgotten the exact story. But then there's evidence of that story being written down again like 30 years later, and again like 30 years later after that. And every time it's written down, it's changed. By the time like 60 years go by, the story has all kinds of stuff. Like there's a love story in there. This guy is the other guy's son. They're basic conventions that are used in Puebloan storytelling techniques that have been inserted to the story to make it a good story by their standards. Okay, so they can change because the storyteller is creative, even though they'll oftentimes deny that they are creative. They are, and sometimes they're doing it on purpose. When they talk about storytelling as performative, the point is that words actually mean something. They perform something. And the example, there are different meanings of that term performative, but one example is like in a ceremony when they say, you know, I pronounce you man and wife. Okay, that actually just changed your state. You are now what? You are now married. Those words had meaning. Okay, here was my joke I thought of on the way here. Give you another example. Oh, that's sexist now. So instead of I pronounce you man and wife, how about I sentence you to death? Okay, see, that has meaning. If you're in a court of law and somebody says I sentence you to death, you're like, oh, snap. Okay, words have meaning. And stories can therefore be used to intentionally change reality. And we can think about this in our everyday life, the news that we see, and how it can be twisted to tell stories. But also going back to like the anthropologist Malinowski from like 100 years ago, he talked about stories as creating social charter. Again, they're justifying the world as we see it around us. Therefore, those stories can be changed when elites want to change the story that we see around us. So stories can be used to change reality intentionally. All right, and so storytelling is a tool of statecraft, therefore. Our leaders use it. Not just our leaders, but all leaders have used storytelling. Think about how the victors write history. They also rewrite history. And we know lots of examples of this from around the world. But the culture anthropologist Jack Goody suggested that in specific, heroic epic storytelling was a tool of statecraft used to inspire people. And so I'm going to come back to that here now and talk about Cahokia. I think, oh, wait, no, I'm not. What is this? Who did this? Okay, here we are. I don't know what that was about. So let's go to Cahokia. I'm going to make the argument that Cahokians created their world through stories. There, I just made the argument. We all do. How are you going to argue with that? That was it. They create their world through stories. Everybody does, okay? But oral societies in particular are dependent on storytelling, okay? And we know that this is a Native American thing. So rituals were the foundation of the Cahokian theater state, okay? So go back to the theater state model. This is a model actually that cultural anthropologist Clifford Geertz came up with to explain the theater state, in, as he called it, in Bali, Indonesia, in the 19th century. And the basic idea is that, our traditional Western Eurocentric notion of what a state is, that the state spreads its power through a military, through armies, that it's coercive power. Okay, and the point of the theater state is not that kings have real power in Bali. They would people might get sacrificed, or there were armies, etc. But the point of the theater state was that people came to they attracted followers to that state by attracting them through theatrical rituals. They wanted to be part of that state. Okay, they wanted to be part of that society. And this is the point I would make about, generally speaking, why were all these immigrants coming to Cahokia. And you'll hear anthropologists talk about celestial events. And, these celestial events were these amazing celestial events. There's one at like 10:25 and one at 10:50 and another one and another one, another one. And you know what? They're visible like all around the world. So it doesn't really explain why they're coming to Cahokia at that time. Okay? And yes, there was a lot of water there. And yes, there was fire. And yes, I'm just going through the Rolodex of recent articles that have come out. Okay? All these things are true. All right, but there are definitely lots of rituals, okay, and dramatic theatrical rituals. No archaeologist would disagree with the notion that there were dramatic theatrical rituals taking place at Cahokia, where they might balk as whether or not you would call it a theater state. And a reviewer of that article wrote, why don't you call it a theater chiefdom? Well, that wasn't what Clifford Geertz, the term he came up with. And if somebody else suggested, I don't like the term state because I think it was a kin-based society, and that's going back to another the work of V. Gordon Childe 100 years ago also, who talked about the definition of a city and said that it's based upon residence rather than kinship. Well, what do we know about Native American states? What do you know about the Aztec, the Maya, Inca? Were they kin-based? Yes, they were. And guess what? So are European royal families. And guess what? I can think of 2 presidents named Bush in my lifetime. So is kinship important in a state? Absolutely it is. So again, this critique of we can't call Cahokia a state, it goes back to a kind of, again, a Western Eurocentric idea of what a state is. And Tim Hawkins has suggested that we should call it a civilization instead. And to me, as an anthropologist, civilization takes us back to ideas from the 1800s, in which the very first anthropologist said there were civilized people, and the other people were not civilized. And what were they? They were barbarians or savages. Okay, so civilization to me is not a better word than state. Okay, so you may not like the word state, but I don't like the word civilization. And Cahokia, whatever else we're going to say about it, it was monumentally more than any other Mississippian society of this time. Okay, so there's something different going on at Cahokia. All right, so rituals are the foundation at Cahokia Theater State. People are coming to help build Cahokia because they want to. Okay, some of you have heard me tell this story before. I come from a family of sheet metal workers. My dad was the guy who created the ducts that went through your ceilings, okay? But if you threw a rock at Local 36 Sheet Metal Workers Union meeting in St. Louis, you would hit a Zimmerman, all right? And my brother, Mark, I have 3 brothers. My oldest brother, David, ran the union for many years. My second brother, Mark, is a newspaper editor. He has never touched sheet metal, but he will point with pride at the St. Louis Arch and tell people that our family built that. As far as I know, none of us touched that. Okay? I believe my uncle was head of the union when it was built. My mom says there's a picture of him by it, but I don't think he worked on it. All right? So people are proud to point at something like this and say, my family built this thing. We came here and we built this thing. Okay? And think about all these immigrants coming in and their new stories and their new ideas and the energy that provides and the labor that provides. Okay? All right, so rituals are the foundation of the Cahokia Theater State. storytelling is a ritual that gives, and it's the stories that give meaning to all the other rituals. Therefore, logically speaking, storytelling was the foundation of all other rituals. The other rituals don't make sense without storytelling. And the final point that I'm going to make, and this is where there's actual archaeological evidence to pull in here, that the Kokian theater state was spread through epic hero stories. Now the problem is, with all this stuff that Tom Emerson published in the last year, I will admit that the 2009 article I wrote on the theater state was kind of not very good on the chronology. Kind of collapsed it all into one pile of Kokia, okay? And I tried much harder. I wrote this paper presented at the SAA meetings 2 years ago, and I worked out the chronology much more carefully. And it worked until Tom Emerson wrote all this stuff in the last year. So I think I can still salvage it though. So just wait for it. I'm gonna go back to Middle Woodland very quickly and say, these are some beautiful Middle Woodland figurines about 1,000 years before Cahokia. These are from the Knight site in the Illinois Valley, up north of us. And we don't know what stories are being told by these little figurines, but you gotta love them. I mean, we think that as archaeologists, we think that they're telling they're just showing everyday scenes. That's the most common interpretation. For example, we see mother nursing her baby and the little baby on the back. You gotta love that. Those are not nearly as common as, I'm going to say there are Casper the Ghost figurines like this. They usually have this is broken here, but they have like a little blobby body and little blobby arms and a little blobby head, and they call them Casper the Ghost figurines because they look like Casper the Ghost. And Ken Farnsworth tells me that there are something like 100 of those that have been found. So I was going to make the point that these are really not that common, but there could be, who knows how many that are not published, that are in private collections. I don't know. These would seem to be more common to me. Would you agree? You're nodding.
I haven't seen that many of them, though.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I'm just telling you, Ken Farnsworth knows stuff. They're not published, I can tell you that. These 100 are not published. I think you're lucky if you can find more than like 12 published, something like that, I'm going to guess. I don't know. This is one we found on the SAUE campus. What's very unusual you'll see about this is that it does actually have legs. Okay, so I would describe this, and I did in fact. We published this in Illinois Archaeology in 2018. It's kind of a hybrid of the two. It's Casper the Ghost from the waist up, and from the waist down, it's one of these guys. Look at those cool little feet they got there. A lot of work went into making those little feet and those legs. Same looks like little baby in the sleepers with the little pointy feet. And when you turn it around, you get this guy's he's got a very well-defined butt crack in the bottom of his butt or the back of his knees. And when you hold it up to the light, you can see light through it. Okay? So somebody spent a lot of time working on the bottom half of this. And then they're like, I'll never get it. And they just finished, I'll just set off as Casper the Ghost. Okay? So it's kind of a hybrid of the two styles. Whereas these are usually found these came from a burial mound. These are not usually from burials. The only one I think that has been found in burial was actually at that same Knight site, and it was in a kid's grave. And so these are more commonly thought to be children's toys. Now, in the feature that we found in the SUE campus, it did have other, like Hopewell fancy pottery in it and mica. So maybe it's a ritual thing, but I've had Native American visitors look at it, and they think it's just a kid's toy. All right. And I just read a story of why the Cherokee corn husk owl has no face. And why didn't it have a face? I don't know. It was something about, like, it was looking at itself too much and not there for the little girl who was supposed to be playing with this doll. I don't remember. Anyway, the point is, Cherokee corn husk owls don't have faces. They're kids' toys. And maybe that's why these don't have faces. I don't know. It's interesting that once corn comes in, they don't make these anymore. So maybe they start making corn husk dolls. I don't know. Much more common are animal depictions like these, okay? And we see they're representing the cosmology, upper world, middle world, lower world creatures, right? Birds of the upper world, middle world would be like mammals, lower world, things like frogs, or anomalous creatures like this beaver that goes between worlds. and I want to point out, this is like one of my favorite artifacts in the whole world. Not only, this is about the size of the palm of your hand, not only because it's just so beautifully made, but look at that little yellow tooth there. That is actually a beaver's incisor that has been carved to look like little beaver incisors and set into his face, her face, and little pearl mothers, real freshwater pearls for eyes. You notice these have holes too, so maybe some of these other pipes also had little pearls for eyes that are now missing. And the beaver in particular is an anomalous creature, goes between worlds because it's a mammal of this world, but it dives down into the water, right? And so it's more likely an earth diver. So a common Native American story about the beginning of the world is that at the beginning of the world it's a water world, and there's this turtle. And like the Iroquois version of the story, a woman comes falling from the sky and she needs land. So there are all these little animals that are swimming around in the water apparently. And so they go diving down, the earth divers go diving down looking for earth. And they go, first one tries, second one tries, third one tries. It's the fourth one that's successful because the number 4 is sacred. 3 is a powerful number because you got 3 worlds, upper, middle, lower world. 4 is powerful because of the 4 cardinal directions. So those are both sacred kind of numbers. So it's the 4th animal that is successful. And for example, it's commonly little muskrat. And little muskrat comes up with earth and slaps it in the back of the turtle and falls back down into the water dead. Sorry. And as it falls down, her little claws go down the back of the turtle and leave those scratches on the turtle's back. So that is why to this day, you see scratches on the back of the turtle. So this is surely an earth diver. A lot of these are showing basic imagery showing the cosmology, the worlds and the origins of it. I love another earth diver is roseate spoonbill. Go look at a video of roseate spoonbills. Has anyone ever seen a live roseate spoonbill? Where'd you see it?
Texas.
Okay, really?
Texas Gulf Coast. Yeah.
Huh, I thought you were going to say the St. Louis Zoo. They do. They do have them in the St. Louis Zoo. I did see them in the Everglades, and I thought they were, how much time do they spend in Texas, do you know?
I'm born and raised in Texas.
No, not how much time do you spend, how much time do they spend? Are they there a lot?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They do live down in the Everglades, and they're not, they could come to this area, but they don't usually, okay? There was a skeleton of a roseate spoonbill that was found in a middle woodland burial mound in a human grave. There was a roseate spoonbill skeleton in that. Did that animal fly up here, get caught on a wind? It could happen, but probably unlikely when you consider this was made in the Illinois Valley, and this was found in a mound in the Illinois Valley. This is actually this mussel shell. You can see they've scraped off the outer shell so that it shows the shiny mother of pearl underneath. This little tiny projection right there tells you what species of shell, that mussel that is. And that particular mussel is only found in this one river that's like down in the same area where the roseate spoonbill are found. It's on the border of Lake Georgia into Florida. So it's possible that one roseate spoonbill flew up here, but probably not. This mussel certainly did not swim up here. So somebody down there who had seen a roseate spoonbill carved this, and it made its way up to Illinois. This was made in Illinois by someone who had probably never seen a roseate spoonbill. So why is the roseate spoonbill so important? Again, it's an earth diver. Watch, and also that color pink. The color red is associated with one of the 4 cardinal directions. In Middle Woodland, people love colorful shirts, and I'm sure that the color is also significant. But I'm sure the roseate spoonbill was an earth diver for Middle Woodland people. There's a zoned Hopewell vessel that was found on the SIUE campus. That beautiful red paint still intact. And when I say zoned, it would have 4 zones going around it, again representing typically the 4 cardinal directions. And Andrew Fortier writes about this would be a bowl. This is a jar. That there's upper world and lower world zoning on the pot as well on this Hopewell jar. So let's jump forward. This is Middle Woodland. This is Mississippian. So this, some of you will recognize as a Ramian-sized vessel. And Tim Buckshot and Tom Emerson wrote 30 years ago now about the symbolism on these Ramey vessels, arguing about, again, zoning, that there's this above the shoulder is upper world, below the shoulder is underworld, and talking about the different symbols that are associated with the different worlds. And some of you, for example, will recognize this as that falconed ice around that you see that tattoo on some of the ice. Oops, wrong way, sorry. And here is, sorry, I just saw a reflection on here. I thought there was somebody behind the TV. I was like, what is happening right there? Sorry. Here is a map from Robert Hall looking at the distribution of Ramey vessels. And some of you are familiar with a paper by Pat O'Brien from the 1990s arguing that Cahokia should be considered a state, but she's going back to again, that Western notion of what a state is, that it's about, kind of coercive power. She thought it should be called the Ramey state based upon the distribution of Ramey pottery. Now we know, recent work by Freiberg shows that some of the pots that are found far away from Cahokia are not necessarily made at Cahokia, but the fact that they are in they're made out of local clays and they have some local symbols on them. But I would also suggest, though, the fact that they are still imitating a style, even if they're not made at Cahokia, they are imitating a Cahokian style. Again, illustrating the power of the reach of Cahokia influence. Okay, so here's a beginning. I was going to say news stories, though. Again, the heroic epic, I'm arguing, is a news story from this time period. We have no evidence of heroic epic stories prior to Mississippian period. Maybe they were there, but as far as the artwork goes, suggests that they began Mississippian period, where you really see heroic imagery in this area. And this was thought to be some of the earliest evidence of that. I think Tom Emerson correctly points out in his critique there that the radiocarbon dating the dating of these is not as clear as we would like to think. So we're not really sure. I'm saying here that they thought they were painted before the Big Bang of AD 50, but probably not, Tom Emerson says, and I think he's correct. He also questions, I will explain this in a second here, he's also questioning, for the people who recognize Gottschall Rock Shelter in Wisconsin, he's questioning whether or not that this is really Redhorn. And I'm not going to lie, I've also questioned whether or not this interpretation really made sense. But in this one, we cannot deny that that person has human head earrings. So is there anyone in here who has not heard of the great hero Redhorn who wore human head earrings? Okay, I don't need to tell the story then, do I? So this is where we're telling the story at night in the winter, and the fire's lit, and we're sitting around, and we all know that there's that Paul Radin recorded the story. It was told to him by Ho Chunk or Winnebago Indians around 1920, and they told him the story of these 10 brothers. So I don't need to tell the story again, do I? No. Okay, I won't. All right, so Redhorn is the youngest of these 10 brothers, okay? Let me say this. I'm going the wrong way again, I'm sorry. One of the critiques of people who don't like this interpretation of this as Redhorn point out that the story would have changed from Mississippian period, to which I would say, well, yeah. Okay, you could call it something else. And in fact, I don't really think that even if you took the Redhorn story and thought that it had not changed over 1,000 years, okay, even if you took it, say, oh, it just didn't change for 1,000 years, this is just the way the Cahokians told it, I still wouldn't think this was Redhorn. I would think this is more like his son, because he's got the human head earring and he's bringing his father's head back from the underworld at the end of the story. Okay, so to the critique that the story would have changed, we should stop talking about Redhorn. They're sick of hearing people talking about Redhorn. Well, everything isn't Redhorn, okay? But what else? There was a great hero who wore human head earrings, okay? It's pretty clear when you look at this imagery that Cahokians believed in some hero who wore human head earrings, all right? And was this a real person? The way we know storytelling works suggests that there could have been a real hero who wore human head earrings. The two versions that were recorded around the same time, the other one was by the anthropologist. Is there a concern there with the...
We did get a comment asking if you could, summarize the Redhorn story.
Oh!
It just came in. I guess there's a little bit of a delay.
Should we take a vote?
Aye.
You want to hear a summary? Okay, all right. Let me get a little drink of water here. Let me go. Well, there's the summary right there. But I'll go back to the fire. I think it'll be more dramatic. I'm just going to tell you this part of it here, chapter 1, okay? Because this is an epic tale, all right? So let me go back. You're going to turn on the fire. All right. All right, so the beginning of the story, there are 10 brothers living in a lodge. And the older brothers always go off hunting, and they leave little brother at home, okay? And they're like, little brother, you're too young. All right, so at some point, we don't know how old little brother is. We just know the older brothers leave him at home all the time while they go hunting. And so I don't know where the parents are. Today, we get locked up for leaving our 10 kids home alone all the time. But at some point, the brothers are going to enter this race. Okay, and once again, they're like, hey, little brother, you're too young. You got to stay home. So the older brothers go off to enter this race. Little brother, who, by the way, is named Hugh Gets Hit with Deer Lungs, he goes off to enter the race. And so as soon as the brothers are gone, he sneaks out, and he turns into an arrow, and he shoots around the world, and he wins the race. Okay, so the winner of the race is going to get to marry the chief's daughter. But we don't know how old he is, but he's like, hey, I'm too young. I can't marry her. And so he gives the right to brother number 9. And brother number 9 is like, I'm too young. I can't marry her. And he gives the right to brother number 8. And it goes on up the line. Finally, brother number 1, whose name is like Kunu or something like that. He's the only other brother that has a name. He marries her. Okay, so now he brings her home to live with the brothers. And we don't know. They're living there together for a while. And now the brothers are going off hunting again. And once again, they're like, hey, little brother, you're too young. You got to stay home. So little Hugh Gets Hit with Deer Lungs is left at home. And the brothers kill a deer and they bring it back. And now the chief's daughter is butchering the deer. And she gets to the lungs and she takes out the lungs and she goes, what? And she throws them and they hit him. And the brothers are like, what'd you do that for? And she said, well, you do it. And they're like, no, we don't. We just call him that. So that name, Hugh Gets Hit with Deer Lungs, is it a good name or is it a bad name? It could mean, some archaeologists think it means he was a fast runner, right? Because if you get hit with deer lungs, you're going to be a fast runner. But it sounds kind of insulting when she actually literally throws the deer lungs at him and people get mad. So unclear, but names are very, very important. And at this point, little brother stands up and he says, from now on, you will no longer call me that. From now on, you will call me the name given to me by the heavens above. And he goes, chook, and a big red braid comes out of his head. You will call me Redhorn. And my other name is... Hugh wears human heads as earrings, and he has these little heads on his ears, and they're alive, and they're sticking out their tongues. Okay, so he has now taken on these new powerful names. And so the rest of the story, he is, as recorded, as told by the Ho-Chunk to Paul Radin, it's got 14 chapters, and it goes through a series of, first they go on warpath, and he gets off, all these girls are then, he becomes a great warrior. And all these girls are throwing themselves at him. And he has the right to marry anybody. But who does he marry? He keeps marrying off these girls to his brothers until he gets his brothers all married off. Finally, he marries an orphan girl. He can marry anybody, but he marries the girl who literally lives over by the dump with her grandma. She's the orphan girl, poor girl. Okay, he can marry anybody. And then he goes through a series of contests with these giants, he and his buddies, and they win and they win and they win. And during the course of that, he takes a new wife, the giantess, So now he's got 2 wives. Not a new wife. He's got 2 wives. To be clear, he doesn't dump the first one. This is, perfectly fine to have 2 wives. So he marries this giantess. Finally, he and his buddies fail. They get killed. They get sent to the village of the giants, dead. And he leaves his 2 wives behind who are pregnant, and they give birth to sons who basically become hero sons and then go and bring Redhorn and his buddies back and bring them back to life. Okay, and it says, it makes it look like it ends here, but it doesn't really. It says that there are other stories. So this is an epic tale, and there are, again, you could, if you were telling these stories, you might tell it over 14 chapters. It might take you 2 weeks. Maybe that's how long Raiden had to stay with the Ho-Chunk at that time. And if he'd stayed all winter, there would have been 30 chapters. Okay. Meanwhile, Alan Skinner is writing down an Iowa version of that story, and it's much shorter. And his hero is called like Washobi or something. He's not called Redhorn. So is this character, is this Redhorn? No, but it is a hero wearing human head earrings who has a braid coming out of his head. Okay? So whether or not it's kind of convenient just to call him Redhorn. We could call him whatever you want, but he is a hero. And this, again, I would suggest when we see imagery like this is the first real evidence of heroic epic tales. Okay? This particular image, and let me say right here, some of the evidence that I would suggest of this heroic storytelling coming out of Cahokia has been undermined by Tom Emerson's recent work, because at this point he's saying pretty much the only thing being made at Cahokia is, guess what? Red flint clay figurines, and does anybody know why? Because this material has been chemically sourced to coming it's from Warrensburg, Missouri, a source very close to Picture Cave, which is that cave that we just saw a minute ago. Okay? So it's chemically sourced to here, and the style is thought to be from here. So these red flint clay figurines that are found, and there's a workshop that was found in East St. Louis during the excavations there. So these red flint clay figurines are just about the only thing left that Tom Emerson thinks is actually made at Cahokia. I'm not so sure about that. He also, the Ramey vessels. But again, some of the ones that are found far away are made in a Ramey style. They're in a Cahokian style, but they're actually made far away. They're made like in Wisconsin or wherever they found them. Okay, this particular pipe is about 1 foot tall. I mean, it's a figurine that has been turned into a pipe. And so one thing that Robert Hall wrote about was the importance of adoption ceremonies among Native Americans. And this is a way, I would argue, for the Cahokian theater state to expand, is when these immigrants and pilgrims are coming to Cahokia and they are adopted as Cahokians. Some of them stay there and live there at Cahokia. Some of them build entire villages out near O'Fallon, where Tim Pawcatuck is excavated out there. Some of them go back home again as pilgrims, all right? But they've been adopted as Cahokians, I would argue. And that is a way to spread Cahokian influence. And so this was turned into a pipe later, and you can see the soot in there where it was literally smoked. I hope everyone has noticed his little human head earrings there, and I will move on. So this epic tale, this is just a version of a story that was probably widely told. We know that at least the Ho-Chunk and the Iowa were telling it 100 years ago. I met a young Ho-Chunk woman a few years ago who had never heard of this story. So I don't think they're telling this story anymore. You know, if Paul Raden hadn't written it down, Tom Emerson was cursing the day that Paul Raden wrote the story down. But I'll tell you what, the Ho-Chunk would have probably lost this story if Paul Raden hadn't written it down. So there were probably lots of different tribes telling versions of heroes who wore human head earrings. And the Iowa version ends with saying quite clearly that that hero was just a man like the rest of us. Okay, some people have questioned whether or not Redhorn, they refer to him as like, supernatural or whatever. He does, the only supernatural thing he does besides coming back to life, okay, he does, in one scene, takes off flying. All right, he and his buddy Stormzy Walk are going to a battle, and Stormzy Walk is like, I'm going to fly ahead. Too bad you can't. He's a Thunderbird. He's like, I'm going to fly ahead. Too bad you can't fly. And then Redhorn's like, oh, but I can. And he takes off flying. Okay, so that flying and the fact that he comes back to life at the end are really the only two things that he does that are not something that a human could do. And I guess the fact that his little earrings stick their tongues out. Okay, and he did do the whole thing where he changed his hair, and he did his brother too before he. Anyway, so he clearly, though, in this story, he is a hero. He is a warrior. He is an athlete. And marrying that orphan girl, you know, when you can marry anybody, it's like, you know, reaching out to the poor and the lonely. Okay, he's like Superman and Jesus all rolled up into one. He's just awesome. He is a hero. All right. The Iowa version makes clear that he is just a man, and it ends with saying, "But his earrings live on." And so when we're going to see in a minute here. Some of the human head earrings that have been found in graves. I think when they end this by saying, and the human head earrings live on, I don't think they literally mean, you know, they're eternal, but they keep making them to remember him by. All right? So yeah, the stories change through time. All right? For example, I'm going backwards again. Where am I going? For example, we're going to see here in a minute Redhorn as this hero as a chunky player. In the Redhorn version, he plays ball. He doesn't play chunky, but Mrs. Kokian's played chunky. Okay, so these are considered to be Braden style in terms of the art style. And I'm not, you know, my specialty, as Bill said, is faunal analysis. Why am I look at animal bones. Why am I doing this? Because there's no bone preservation on my site, so I have to do something. Okay, so I'm not an art historian. I'm not. I can recognize Braden style artifacts because they look really cool, but I'm not the one who invented this terminology. All right, and now, you know, Jim Brown wrote extensively like 20 years ago arguing that Braden style was coming out of Cahokia, and now Tom is saying, yeah, the red flint clay figurines. Of course, he found some of these, and he sourced the material. So this comes from Cahokia, but he's saying there's no evidence that any of these copper plates actually were made at Cahokia. We'll come back to that thought in a second. You can't argue that this was made at Cahokia because some of you know this was found in the corner of Monk's Mound. I'm sure lots of you have seen this before because you've been to the Interpretive Center. And no one's questioning whether or not that was made at Cahokia, but it was found here. The question is, are these artifacts found far and away, far around, or are they coming from Cahokia or not? These also being made from red flint clay, he would agree, came from Cahokia. All right. So these are all Braden style. We see in the Birdman imagery. And the Birdman imagery, 20 years ago, Jim Brown was arguing that the Birdman was another manifestation of Redhorn. And again, there's that scene where Redhorn goes flying. And Jim Brown, a couple years ago, changed his interpretation to, I don't know if anybody else caught that, calling the Birdman is actually the Weatherman. And I'm not even going to try to explain that argument to you. I'm just going to move on. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm going in the right direction here. Here we go. Other depictions of Redhorn. Robert Sharp has suggested that these are all depictions of Redhorn, and whether or not they all are, or again, that hero, this guy, I don't care what you want to call him. He thinks they're all the same guy. They look alike, don't they? The facial features are the same. They've got the same hairstyle. And so what Robert Sharp has suggested is that they're different manifestations or different depictions of Redhorn doing his different activities. So here's Redhorn as you know him with his human head earring. This is called the Resting Warrior. And Big Boy, it's got a bunch of different names. This one, you can see he's got his chunky stone, okay? This one, he's not wearing human head earrings. He's wearing an ear spool, but he's got the same hairstyle, same face. This is the only one that was actually made to be a pipe, and that's why the back comes like that. There's a hole in here. This one, the holes were drilled in later, so it doesn't have the back sticking out like that. This one is not a pipe at all. And this one is a little bit smaller, you can see. You notice they're all actually naked. You can see genitalia on all of these. This one, Robert Sharp thinks that this is a depiction of Redhorn with his bundle. At the end of the story, he leaves his bundle behind to his sons, to the tribe, that the bundle has his war stuff in it, right? So bundles are very important. Native Americans. Tim Pocket has written a lot about this, how the bundles have all different kinds of stuff, like, magical stuff in them. And they would be passed on. I think the Iowa version of the story also ends with the war bundle being passed on to whoever. But I would also point out that Redhorn's a healer. I forgot to mention that. People keep coming to him to get healed. And wow, what a great guy. So this could also be his pot with his healing stuff in it, and a shaman or a priest would also have bundles with their healing medical kind of stuff in it. So it could be a war bundle, or it could be a kind of a shamanic kind of bundle. Okay. And I should mention that all of these were found at Spiro, and I want to say this one was not. Isn't this found in St. Louis? You know?
No, it was found in Oklahoma, but not
Oklahoma,
Spiro.
not at Spiro. Okay. This one, not Oklahoma though. I don't think. I don't remember. Anyway, these though were all four found at the Spiro site in Oklahoma. So I should mention here, Spiros. I will use the term hoarder, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but they're like accumulating all this stuff. This mound was dug at Spiro, Oklahoma, western Oklahoma. Unfortunately, not excavated by archaeologists. During the Depression, people going in there basically looting this mound to get all these fabulous artifacts out of it to sell, and incredible vast quantities of beautiful, beautiful Mississippian artifacts. So the biggest collections that we know of, to start with the marine shell cups that we'll look at in a second, that's what Jim Brown and what's his face?
Phillips.
Thank you. Wrote several large volumes on the marine shell cups that came out of Spiro, but also copper plates, and the largest collection of these red flint clay figurines came from the Spiro site. And these are four of them. And again, we see the guy with the human head earrings here. This is thought to be Turtle from the story. Turtle is he's the trickster in the story, but he's also a warrior, because Turtle has armor on his back, right? And he's one of Redhorn's buddies. If it weren't clear by his armor stuff that he's wearing here that he's Turtle, he actually literally has a little tiny turtle carved on his head. Can you see that little tiny bump there? That is the turtle's head of the turtle on his head. Okay, here he's cutting off a head of somebody he's captured. Some people think that this is also Turtle because he's got a similar kind of helmet and armor thing on, and he's got this person here in this pose. But Steve Bowles has written an article where he thinks this is Otter, and he thinks that these it's like having your action hero set where you've got all the main characters together. And some people call this Grizzly Man. They don't know actually what to think about this guy. Steve Bowles thinks that this is, I think, Wolf from of Redhorn's buddies. All right. So I also want to say that there are female figurines, and I know Gail has written a lot about the female figurines. I don't want to underestimate the importance of stories of women, and in fact, Tom Emerson is suggesting that the early part of Cahokia's, up to from AD 1050 to 1200 or something like that. It's the women's stories that are the more important stories. And then it's after AD 1200 that the warrior imagery becomes more important. The problem with that argument is that they appear to be made these figurines. This looks, these could be made by one artist. This could be made by a different artist. Again, I'm not an art historian, but when I look at this figurine, I think, she must have been made by the same person who made this one. The artistry is just so incredible. So the problem with saying that it goes from I think fertility figurine, early fertility imagery in the first part of Cahokia, and to warrior imagery later. These, if we think these are coming out of a single workshop, that argument doesn't make a lot of sense. And I should add that they did find evidence of a workshop in the excavations at East St. Louis. So I know Gail has written about calling this, interpreting this as Old Woman Who Never Dies, Hidatsa character, but more generally across a number of cultures, the grandmother character. Tom Emerson prefers to think of her as the Earth Mother. I want to point out she's associated with plants. So this is a sunflower, and Gail, do you want to reiterate why you think this is not corn that she's holding there, or no?
Anatomically, it's just very incorrect for corn in several different ways. But there are no kernels, and if you go around to the back, the husk wraps around the stalk, and corn husks, to my knowledge, do not wrap around the stalk.
And yeah, and I don't know what it's supposed to be then if it's not.
No,
that's the problem, right?
That's the problem.
And there are other, so it may not even be a plant. I don't know. Maybe they're bowling pins or something, but
Animal hooves or something. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. But that's definitely a sunflower. And as Tom points out, there is another figurine that definitely has an ear of corn with corn kernels on it.
From Spyro, much later. And not
Oh, that's right. And it's not flint clay either.
It's not from Flint Clay.
Yeah. So frankly, I don't think he should have lumped it into this discussion, but I'm just saying. Anyway, you see she's got this thing behind a bundle behind her, very similar to the bundle in front of her. So again, women had bundles too. The snake is a common imagery that is found in these figurines and is associated with the grandmother character. Actually, in the story of the grandmother, she's married to a snake. In this case, aren't we? In this case, not anymore. In this case, though, in the story, the old woman quite clearly protects her husband, the snake. In this, she's hoeing into the back of the snake. Let me see if I have other images going around here. I didn't put them all in here because I was focusing on the heroic epic. But this snake actually, when it comes around the side, it's not a normal snake. It's got like a rattlesnake. I think it's got a rattle, doesn't it? No, what am I thinking of? But the tail goes up the back and turns into a gourd vine. And I know, Gail, you've identified the gourd is actually a Mexican gourd, right?
Well, Cucurbita gyrosperma, the Kusha, but it had spread up
Oh,
here by the
right. I wasn't meaning that it came from Mexico. I mean, it came from Mexico. So it's a species that was domesticated in Mexico. Yeah, we're not suggesting that they had Amazon bringing up gourds from... Anyway, what else was going to say about her? Well, let's just move on to what I want to say here is that I've put these in order of size. And, I wonder, this one is really tiny. It's like the size of my thumb or something like that. Whereas this one, a lot of you have seen, there's a reproduction of that at Cahokia Interpretive Center at Cahokia Mountains. And these were on display, as you can see, at the St. Louis Art Museum for a long time. Sad to tell you, they are not anymore. I don't remember which ones are left. They've all been on display at St. Louis Art Museum at one point in the recent past, but I'm not sure what's there right now. But I know this one went back to Urbana. But anyway, this one's like 9 inches taller or something like that. So I've got these arranged in the order of size, and I want to point out to you that Robert Sharp has also written about in the Cumberland Valley, I think, of Tennessee. They've got these old woman figurines made out of clay. They're locally made out of clay, and he thinks they're showing the different life stages of the grandmother, that going from a young woman to an old woman. And yeah, the grandmother story, she can actually jump into the water and come back out young again, which is pretty awesome. I keep getting ads for that on my Facebook, and I'm not sure if it's real. Should I spend money on that? All right, but apparently it worked for her. She found it. Anyway, so if we put these in order of size, I think it's kind of interesting that a lot of archaeologists have written about the fact that this one here has no breasts, and I wonder if she has no breasts because she's actually supposed to be a little girl, and that's why she's a little tiny, because she's supposed to be a little girl. She also has no breasts, and this one is heavily worn from use. This is the only one that was actually made to be a pipe. Again, has a snake coming around her. She's got a whelk shell in front of her. But I wonder if this is intentional, showing different stages of life, because when we look at a side view of her, she has breasts, but they're not very big, and then she has very well-developed breasts. So I do wonder if that is supposed to show different stages of life of this woman, Earth Mother, old woman who never dies, grandmother character. And other examples of female figurines, these from the Spooneman site, I want to point out how that's burning on them because they were smashed and burnt. And so a lot of these were ritually destroyed. It's been questioned whether or not, I think this did get hit by a backhoe, but they've also questioned whether or not it was broken prehistorically. A lot of them were broken prehistorically. And when you look at the details on their face, I don't know if this is supposed to be the same character. Look at the eyes. Look at that little curve in the nose. That's either made by the same person, and that's the way they make faces, or it is supposed to be the same character. And I think that isn't it, Gail, isn't it a snake around her head?
I'm not sure what that is.
Or no, it's like a turban or something. Snake turban? I don't know. My hair does that in the morning. I don't know. And I don't remember what that is off the top of my head right this second. I don't think I want to talk about this anymore. Any questions about this? They're beautiful, though, aren't they? Okay, so, I think the female stories are really important, too. I'm not saying that they're not, but this is what we see when we look at the distribution of these male and female figurines. And again, at this point, Tom accepts that these are actually being made at Cahokia because he did the research. And because... this is where the red stone comes from. Okay, Greater Cahokia, yes. And when I do agree, that when we talk about Cahokia, we should consider Cahokia, East St. Louis, and St. Louis to be a site. All right. So East St. Louis is where the workshop was, but yes, these remain at Cahokia. When we look at this, these are the red dots are female, the blue dots are male, and you can see the female figurines are mostly found pretty close to the American bottom here. There's one in the boot heel, and then there's this one. The only one that's outside this area here is down here. I think it's pronounced Deshaw County, Arkansas. It is. Go back. It is this one here, right? She was found. Yes. In Deshaw County, Arkansas. Before I go on, I want to say that, part of Tom's critique that about the, he's saying, if all this stuff is being made at Cahokia, why isn't it found there? Well, guess what? The greatest concentration of these flint clay figurines was found where? At Spiro. Okay, but we know it's being made at Cahokia. Also, they dug the main mound at Spiro. Have we dug the main mound at Cahokia? No, we have not. And who knows, again, what's in collections, in private collections that was dug up through the years. All right, so I want to move to other media very quickly. Looking at the engraved shell, these gorgets. This is considered to be Braden style. This is considered to be Adams style, but they're considered to be like Cahokian styles. Now, this is actually the Craig style, which is associated with Spiro. But there were no, this is a nicer depiction of what a marine shell cup would look like. When we look at the distribution of these, of male and female, did I mention that these are thought to be, this is a female motif? So the spiders would be tattooed on the hands of Osage women, for example. And so the spider associated with weaving is supposed to be a woman's motif, weaving the world. And so when we look at the male and female motifs in the shell, what we see, again, red being female, again, clustering not too far from Cahokia, but the supposed Cahokian styles for male images being found at much greater distances. Looking at the copper, okay, copper coming from the Great Lakes. Tom does agree that marine shell beads are made at Cahokia. Copper coming from the Great Lakes, again, this Braden style was thought to have been made at Cahokia. Now Tom's arguing with that. And I don't know if you caught that, Gail, but he's saying he doesn't believe that the copper workshop, in Mound 34, he always puts in quotation marks. He says, but they actually found a copper workshop in East St. Louis. Okay. So, anyway, the copper plates, they're all showing male images. And again, these have been purported to be coming mostly from Cahokia, but Tom would disagree with that. I don't know of any female images on those copper plates. Finally, the human head earrings. And again, I would make the argument that when people are wearing these, they are seen as they believe in some story about a hero with human head earrings. So sometimes these are made out of copper, sometimes they're made out of shell, sometimes bone. But that shows you the distribution of those. And the copper is in green there, and the shell is in blue, and purple, I don't know what the purple is. Okay, so I would just want to point out, I have a student who knows GIS who made that really nice map. This is one I did with crayons. But I think it looks pretty cool. And so when you look at this, goddess stories in red and hero stories in blue. And so here's where the supposed artifacts being made at Cahokia showing female imagery limited to this area, and the male imagery over a much bigger area, except for that one that her coming from right there. Okay, so again, going back to my argument that I think you don't see this kind of heroic imagery prior to the Mississippian period. So I'm arguing that this is a new kind of story, the heroic epic. And again, this has been argued in the old world to be, when you see the invention of the heroic epic, it's associated with state-level society, that the heroic epic is used to inspire warriors, okay? And so I would argue the same thing happened here, and this is our evidence for it, in the appearance of these figurines, and then when you look at a distribution like this, they're keeping the female imagery closer to home. Those female stories are very important. And maybe it has something to do with why immigrants come here and stay here, but it's the warrior stories that are being used to spread Cahokian influence. And there's a more professionally done example of that map. But in this case, I've added the Ramey pots. So the Ramey pots are in green. And that does make the story a little bit more complicated. But again, some of these are locally made, but they are still showing Cahokian influence. And I think I'll stop there. Questions?
So we have two from Facebook. One is, I think you touched on it briefly, how do you know it's a woman spider? And as part of that, it's also, are there astronomical significance to these gorgeons?
Okay, let me answer the spider question first. How do I know they're associated with women? Francis LaFlesche was an Omaha anthropologist, Native American, who studied among the Osage like 100 years ago. And so he, I think, recorded the importance of the spider to the women among the Osage. And is there cosmological significance? I mean, yes, the moon is important, and the sun is important, and celestial events are important, and I have no idea. Okay, I was thinking you mean like stars cosmological. Astronomical? Is that what they said? Yeah. I mean, in terms of weaving worlds together, I suppose.
Sometimes Red Horn is also a morning star.
Yes, yes. But she's asking, or is it not the spider? Which is the,
They were like from the same person. But
okay? Ask the question again about the astronomical.
are there astronomical significance to the gorgets?
To the gorgets. Well, let's go back and look at the gorgets and see if we're inspired by that. Is there astronomical significance to the gorgets? I think that Spider Woman is supposed to weave worlds together, but astronomical, yes. Red Horn is thought to be the morning star.
Marilyn tells the story of Grandmother Spider, and she invents pottery and fires the pottery on a long journey. But she also, at the end of the story, she is in charge of fire, and she throws the ashes into the air and creates the sun, the moon, and the stars. And then
There
she
you
takes
go.
her web and throws them over and brings the sun up every morning and brings the sun down every evening, and same with the moon. So there's a whole lot of stuff with her. She's just in charge of a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And do you know what like tribe that's coming from?
Ugh, I knew you were going to say that.
Well, see, so that's the, we criticize like what story should we be looking at? I mean, to some extent, I think, it makes more sense to look at tribes that are closer than tribes that are farther away. But again, Cahokia was multi-ethnic, so.
Yeah, I want to say it was a Midwestern tribe, but I'm not sure. And she doesn't like to really ascribe tribes to any of her stories anyway, because she's a white woman.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to get in that whole sticky mess.
And if I added 5 more slides there, it would end with, do I even have the right to tell these stories? I just gave a presentation on storytelling. I didn't talk about Cahokia except in one slide at the SEAC meetings in the fall. And, as I was preparing sending my abstract in there, they ask you now, do you have pictures of human remains? And no, I didn't have any pictures of human remains in my presentation. And then they asked, do you have any pictures of funerary, objects? Well, almost all this stuff was found in graves. And so, that gave me pause. And I went ahead and checked the box, yes, because I hadn't made my PowerPoint yet. But when I actually went to make my PowerPoints, months later, I decided not to put images of any of these artifacts in it, because it did raise, it did make me think, do I have the right to even show these pictures? A part of me says that they were telling these stories and they wanted them to be shared, right? Because if they didn't want them to be shared, the artifacts wouldn't be found hundreds of miles from Cahokia. But on the other hand, they did bury them in the end, so maybe that was their final decision, was to put them in the ground. And so do we have the right to tell the stories? Do we try to show these images? I mean, it gets to be kind of a thorny question. I know nothing at all what she asked, but.
I think one point when we talk about the Missouri, the red flint clay, it's really not clay. It's a type of stone. It's a
Right.
semi-soft stone.
Yep.
And I think that's confusing. Unfortunately, that's the name of the stone.
Yep.
And so those were not clay figurines, but stone figurines.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes,
I don't know if they could hear that on the.
Yeah, they're made out of, the red flint clay is actually soft stone that is called flint clay, but it's stone. Yes, they're stone. So these,
I wonder
where
how
they
much,
went.
How
That is stone.
great it was to find a large piece of clay stone to make something like that. Most of it you see nowadays is little 2 or 3 inch chunks. To make something like Big Boy, man, that'd take a heck of a chunk of it, and it had to be almost perfect. I would think that would be extremely valuable
Right.
at that time.
And maybe they're only making these for, like, they think within the span of a century, right? Maybe that's why. Maybe they run out of the material really quickly.
Yeah.
Although it is similar, like originally when they were finding these, right, they thought they were bauxite from Arkansas and then catlinite from up like Minnesota or someplace, and it was finally, like 20 years or so ago with the infrared microscopy that Tom and his people did, that it proved that it is this stone from here, but maybe they ran out of it very quickly.
We have another Facebook Live question, and
Yes.
What is around the Birdman's waist?
Which one are we talking about? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
What is around the Birdman's waist? Okay, let's go back. Oh, you mean this one?
Maybe.
Well, he's wearing. They call this the bellows apron. It's actually thought to be a scalp that they wear, but I don't think that's what that would be really hard to see in that imagery, and I can't imagine. Maybe they're talking about maybe this one. Again, there's the bellows apron as is thought to be a scalp that they're wearing.
Yeah, it's up on the shell on the left too. Upper left.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, that is a scalp that they wear. And the reason that is identified as a scalp is that they have like the hair doodads. and they're not the hair this is like hair ornamentation that they're on them, but it's never the ornamentation that they themselves wear in their hair. It's always somebody else's ornamentation, because you don't wear your friend's scalp, because that'd be really bad. I'm thinking, what if they mean when people talk about, from this area, talk about the Birdman, maybe they mean the sandstone one? Oh, no, there's no waist. So, yeah, that's the... Any other questions? So I think the problem is, actually with the stuff that Tom just published, where he's talking about Caddoan connections. Did I pronounce that right? Caddoan? Coming from Spiro. That's all well and good, but monumentally, Koki is just so much more. Is like to go all the way to Trempealeau, Wisconsin, and build a shrine. Has anyone paddled upriver lately? It's really hard. I have, and it's really hard. I cannot imagine paddling all the way. What would possess you to do that? And to go all the way down to like Carson, I think, Mississippi, and build an outpost there. I mean, nobody's doing that kind of stuff besides Kokians. Yes.
We have two again. One is about what's on the back of this red horn figurine.
There is debate about, okay, so one interpretation, remember he turns into an arrow and shoots around the world to win the race. That is one interpretation, is that these are depictions of arrows. Another one is that they are supposed to be like raccoon.
Okay, we're back on. The second one was red flint clay depleted, or has any of the source material been found in recent years?
Well, the source material has been found, but I don't know how much is there. I don't know exactly where it is. I just know it's near Picture Cave. And, yeah. Larry, do you know anything about that?
What's that?
What's left of the red flint clay, the source?
No, I just, whatever, I got mine from Jim Duncan.
There you go.
He seems to know where the source is. So.
It's a highly kept secret about exactly where it's coming from.
There's
So.
sinkholes, I think that's where it's found. It's underground, which is another really,
Well, that is also very cosmic, isn't it?
yeah.
I think it's Warren County, Missouri, that
Yeah.
And a lot of them were mined out for, to use on stoves and things like that, because they are I think that's how it got its name,
Oh.
fire clay. Because they were used along.
Like historically?
Sorry?
Historically, you mean?
Historically. yeah,
Wow. Because, I mean, if...
Fire brick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know much about it, and it was, there's several of these source, I mean, it's not just one source. There are sinkholes that are around the Missouri River, right, Bill? And,
very limited area, though.
yeah, it's a sort of a fire clay district with these sinkholes that have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how big the chunks get, do you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think Larry's right. They'd have to be at least that big, or you couldn't.
Don't break it.
Norma, your hand is up. I can barely see you back there because it's so dark in here.
When you were talking about the stories of Red Horn maybe not being about a particular character named Red Horn, but this kind of concept of an epic hero
Mm-hmm.
who was important or a founder or did certain things that were epic. This kind of fits in with the archetypal concept
Yeah.
of the epic hero that you
Yep.
find all over the world.
Right. Absolutely. And so I'm also suggesting, they're, I'm remembering an argument around my dinner table 10 years ago in which my little son was trying to say that Jesus wasn't real. And I was like, No one questions whether or not there was a historic Jesus, do they? Doesn't everybody agree that there was a Jesus? The question is whether or not Jesus was the Son of God, right? And so I think some of these archetypal heroes, they probably were real people once upon a time that really inspired people, and then the story's built. And then that's when you get to all those formulas that are added and all the, like, originally he was just a super powerful guy, and then the flying got added later, So yes, he's an archetypal hero, but I think there well could have been an actual person that inspired these stories that just then grew, right? It was a legend. I'm going to use that word. Is your hand? Is that your hand?
Yeah. We have one more. Have you ever found or researched faunal remains that display these epic stories?
Faunal remains? No. Isn't that boring? Fish and deer, deer and fish. I mean, really, Gail's research is much more interesting because there's much more variation in plants. And they char, so you get better preservation. I really have nothing to say about animal remains. They're very boring. Anybody else?